Hello, everyone. Welcome back. Good morning. We have about 3 minutes and then class will start, so just get comfortable and be with everyone in just a few moments. Today we're going to talk about ethics, and we're going to talk a little bit about the theory of utilitarianism from John Stuart Mill. So we have our plan, and hope you guys are having a good morning so far and a nice week. Peachy. Peachy. Good morning. Hey, Ivan. Peachy, no. He's just having a good morning. Really just following me around. So literally just like lay like this, like for as long as I really want to hold it. I mean, it's just such a good kitty. That's something that I'll miss when the COVID thing's over with. I mean, I won't miss much of anything, but being able to just chill at home with the cats while I'm lecturing is definitely kind of cool. I'd much rather be in the classroom, but I mean, come on, what I'm dealing with here. This is too cute. It's kind of funny, you know, if like throughout this semester, you guys are going to kind of see these cats grow because, you know, they were just born on March 29th, and when the semester started, they're not even like what? They're basically like 5 months old. So by the time the semester's over here, whoa, bitch, don't walk on the computer. They're going to be like twice the size, you know, up to like 8 or 9 months. Okay, well, good morning, everybody. Good to see everyone here. Feel free to say hello in the chat. Thanks for your attendance and everything else. Let's just get back to our meeting schedule. So today the goal is to really break into the whole subject of ethics. Peachy, okay. I'm gonna have to let her go over here. Sorry, girl. I'll be out in a bit. Okay. Yes, so good morning, everybody. All right, yeah, so we're talking now about ethics. Let me just create some quick notes for us on this. Ethics, we mentioned last time, is the theory of morality and moral concepts, the study of morality and moral concepts. So when you think about things like ethics is the study of morality, and words that come into your mind or that pop up in your head when you start thinking of ethics, buzzwords include things like this: right versus wrong, good versus bad, just versus unjust, moral versus immoral. You know, so like I'm just trying to give you guys some familiar terms that kind of express the different polarity of like a moral action, whether it's a good thing or a bad thing. And of course, it's related to our behavior, so you could also just think of it along the lines of how one ought versus how one ought to not act. as things we have a sense of right and wrong, and we also make moral judgments of our own behavior and of other people's conduct, and sometimes of policies or of decisions that are made. Sometimes we look at a person's behavior and we say, you know what, they did the right thing, and so they get praised for that. Or, you know what, they did something really wrong. That was bad. They should never have done that. Then they get criticized, or even worse. So sometimes you are the subject of moral judgment. People make mention of, your moral record. Why did you do that? Shame on you. Hi, Amy. I see you there. Or a person could say, hey, pat on the back, credit. That was good on you. You did something really good. So we are all of us capable of moral judgment and capable of facing moral judgment too. What you need to learn is that there have been some very powerful theories developed in the Western tradition that have tried to give a sense of structure to our thinking about ethics. We all, I think, have like kind of informal moral intuitions that we've just formed throughout our life, throughout our experience, maybe by our upbringing. But there have been some very interesting and detailed philosophical accounts in the whole tradition of our Western corpus of published work that try and give some kind of clear, reasonable guidelines for at least how some people conceive of the realm of ethics. Okay, now I want to tell you about 3 major categories of action within ethics. So in ethics, there's like 3 main types of action. So some actions are classified as morally impermissible. Then, sort of the reverse of that, there are actions that are morally permissible. And then finally, you also have actions that are in the realm of being morally obligatory. Now, I want to kind of just define these, and then we'll think of some examples of each kind. But starting at the top, what do you think it means to say an action is morally impermissible? Just off of your everyday common sense and your knowledge of English, what does it mean, if you had to guess, to say it's morally impermissible? Parker, you say so bad it can't be forgiven. I think that might be a little too strong, but it's not completely off base. It doesn't need to be that it's that you can never forgive. So you might be thinking unforgivable or something. Not necessarily, but definitely something bad. Anybody else? Something morally impermissible? Maybe just a more straightforward way of saying it. It's just something that's what? Morally impermissible. Think about the words. Permissible, not permitted. So it's something that you should not do, something that is wrong. Okay, good. Samuel, you say not accepted by society. Well, not necessarily. You can have perhaps actions that are accepted by society that are wrong. Because morality is not necessarily just majority rules type of thing. But anyway, yes, it's just actions that are morally wrong, and maybe you could say less formally, something that's not okay for people to do. So actions that are wrong and not okay to do. Okay, now, 1 second. All right. On the other hand, what about an action that's morally permissible? If it's morally permissible, it's just sort of the flip side of impermissible. So if impermissible are the acts that are wrong and they're not okay, you would say an action that is not right nor wrong, the permissible category? Not necessarily, but I guess not totally off base. Let's see another suggestion. They are okay to do. I see that, Parker. Good. Things that are okay to do that are not wrong. Okay? That's the way I would put it. Permitted based on morality, yes. So these are actions that are not wrong, and they are okay to do. The reason that I hesitate to say it in a more positive sense, like actions that are right, is because okay, right is thought usually to be the contrary of wrong, and that's correct. But sometimes the word right with it carries connotations of, acts of noble self-sacrifice where you really create a very positive effect, like giving blood, donating to charity, working at a food bank, helping foster cats or something, or working with at-risk youth, putting out fires. Yeah, sure, those are all morally permissible, definitely. But it doesn't have to be something that has any kind of major consequence or impact. It could also just be all the little random daily things that no one could accuse you of having done something blameworthy for. So like, I'm wearing these glasses and that's morally permissible, although it doesn't really benefit anybody else except for just me. It's just something that's not wrong. So there's nothing immoral or evil about that choice. Now, it also includes and encompasses within its scope all of those noble types of action that I mentioned, sacrifice and giving and virtuous acts like that. But it's not merely limited to them. So these are things that are permitted morally and they're okay to do. Now, third, morally obligatory. Based on the wording, maybe you have a guess about morally obligatory acts. They're kind of like over and beyond being permitted. They are permitted, but furthermore, they're actions that you must, or yes, you have an obligation to do. So these are actions that you must do, and they would actually be wrong not to do. Okay, so when you're talking about a morally obligatory action, the word obligation is in there. So that means it's kind of morally mandatory or required instead of being morally just allowed or optional. So morally permissible actions you may do, morally obligatory actions you must do, morally impermissible actions you're not supposed to do, you must not do, even though people, of course, do things that are morally not permissible. They're not physically impossible, but they're morally not permissible. Now, let's think quickly, if we can, of any examples of the different categories. Say I ask you, what is some action that is morally impermissible, like a type of action? There's some clear cases that probably everyone can agree with. What do you think could fit that description of a morally impermissible type of act? Like, what is an example of such an act? For example, to do what? Something morally impermissible, something wrong, something not okay to do. Slapping people? Okay, yeah, sure. Just randomly slapping people in the public square. That's like a form of assault, as we know. And it's a wrong thing, and it's not okay to do. Murder, okay, just going straight for the top there, Gary. Yeah, murder's high on the scale of things that are wrong. Not listening in class, it's perhaps unwise, but I don't know if, I don't really care personally about people. I want the students to learn, but it's kind of on their own initiative. If they choose not to, then they're just kind of harming themselves. In some sense, I guess they're doing themselves a disservice, and that might be considered wrong. Stealing, yeah, definitely another good case. When you take property that's not yours and it hasn't been granted to you as a gift, then you have no right to own it, and the transfer of ownership is illegitimate, and we know that. Murder, killing people without cause, they have a right to live. People are not just objects to just dispose of like trash, so that's definitely one of the worst things you could do. So yeah, there's all kinds of stuff that goes into that category. Nothing nice. Some of it's really grave. It could go all the way up towards murder, rape, torture, genocide, and then also all the way down to little less consequential stuff, telling private lies, breaking promises, and so on. All right. Now, on the other hand, there are morally permissible acts, of course. I figure you guys can come up with plenty of easy examples of that because this is a good moral group of students, and that means I would judge that probably almost all of your behavior falls in that category. You usually don't do things that are wrong, right? So what do you think could be some cases of things that are morally permissible actions, things that are not wrong and perfectly okay to do them? Like what? Driving to work, sure, yeah. As a philosopher, I always try to be picky, so I always try to think, is there any counterexample? Maybe if the person works, like as a, I don't know, a foreign agent conducting espionage against the state without permission, you could argue that that's a bad type of work, or that if they're driving a certain car, some people might argue that the type of car they have emits too much. But yeah, fair enough. I'm not trying to push too hard. Driving to work, generally fine. Walking around, just walking through, the street. No problem with that. Certainly too, and permitted, but probably like valorous or salutary. You know, it's good on top of just being permitted. Yeah, so all kinds of things. Me wearing these glasses, that's morally permitted. You attending this lecture, nothing wrong with that either. One second. Sorry, just FedEx package showed up to my door, so I had to collect it off the doorstep. Yeah, so there's lots of things that are morally permissible. Picking up a package off of your doorstep, riding a bike, eating a meal. Okay, now morally obligatory actions. Maybe that's a little bit difficult to think of at first, but I'm sure we can come up with some good examples. Morally obligatory acts. So like, for example, if you sat down and you ate a meal at a restaurant, paying at the end before you leave, is that, you think, morally obligatory or just permissible? Well, it is permissible to pay, but of course it's obligatory as well. It's not like you have the option of not doing so. That would be both legally and morally wrong. How about if you made a promise, made a personal promise to somebody? Now notice that that's a moral obligation that you generate when you promise something, but it's not legally obligatory, at least unless it's backed by a contract. So like, for example, if I promise someone who wants a ride back from the airport, hey, you know what, you need a ride, you don't want to take a lift, I'll come and get you at 12 on Saturday, and I promise you, and I put it on everything. You have my word. So I made a strong promise there. Suppose that they're at the airport, they're waiting for me, it's 30 minutes later, they call me up, they're like, where are you at, did you hit traffic? You know you're picking me up like you promised, right? And I say to them, oh yeah, I know I promised, but I'm definitely not coming. See, I'm laughing at you because I think it's funny to break promises, and I'm not a nice guy. So how do you feel about that? Hanging up. Now that's wrong, that's morally wrong, but it's not illegal. So I want to make a point too. Don't confuse morality with legal permissibility and impermissibility, because although they're sometimes the same, they can diverge. There can be cases of laws that are themselves unjust, and then there can be cases of actions that are not in themselves wrong, that are prohibited by the law. And there can be actions that are allowed under the law that are wrong. So, for example, the promise to pick the person up is not enforceable against me under the law. You can't say on the other end of the line, well, you think it's funny that I'm stranded at the airport? I hope you're gonna have to deal with the police now because I'm calling the cops. You broke a promise. Well, a private promise of that kind is just a moral obligation, but not a legal one. On the other hand, there can certainly be acts or practices that were illegal, at least at some time, or maybe still in some places, but they're wrong things. Can you think of anything that was legal at any time in history, but is immoral? At least, almost all would agree. What do you think? Could there be anything legal but wrong to do? Not necessarily now, but at any time in history. What do you think? Let me know. Something legal, but morally wrong. Okay, good example. Slavery, sure, Parker, and Ivan and Jess. So slavery, as we all know, was a legal institution for a long time, and but when it was abolished, that was a good thing, right? That was a good moral thing. It doesn't mean that it only became wrong when people changed the law, and before that it was right, because following the law is always right. No. Like people breaking the law back then, like let's say facilitating the escape of slaves during the time of the Underground Railroad, like Harriet Tubman, those were people doing good moral things, even though they're breaking the so-called law. If you're living in Nazi Germany and you're giving safe harbor to like Jewish people, like in the Anne Frank house, you'd be doing something good morally, even though according to the Nazi laws, you're violating the law. So, of course, most of the time, and we hope almost all the time, law and morality will coincide. But there's always the possibility for them to deviate from each other, because people, being what we are, we're fallible, and we can institute laws that don't reflect some kind of enlightened conception of right and wrong. And that, of course, has happened. I mean, even today, some people will argue that constitutionally protected right to an abortion is immoral. It's definitely a pro-life movement that says, well, those are unjust laws that should be rescinded. But anyway, I'm just trying to make a point. Some people believe that recreational drug use is not wrong, but of course it's prohibited federally. So the judgment about whether something is right or wrong runs a little deeper than just looking at the status of the law. 100 years ago, women were granted the right to vote in the United States by the 20th Amendment, but prior to that, they couldn't. So, does it only become right to do something once it becomes legal? The general thinking is that law takes its inspiration from morality, not the other way around. So that leads to the possibility of bad laws and people committing civil disobedience out of a recognition that the laws are bad. In the time of Prohibition, it was illegal to drink alcohol, and then they had to change the Constitution again to abolish Prohibition. So it's not like the moral status of the act keeps flip-flopping back and forth. Anyways, just making a point about these different categories and some actions that could reasonably fit into the different ones. So now I'm going to talk to you about the first major moral theory that we will study. And moral theories now, they provide us with some kind of criteria that allows us to sort and classify actions into these three different categories. Ethics presumes that every action that a person does willfully, deliberately on purpose, is going to be a member of one of these three groups. It's either something that's wrong and you shouldn't do it, or it's okay and you may do it, or even furthermore, that it's an obligation and you have to do it. I can think of another morally obligatory case of a very important vow, like keeping a person's marriage vows, not cheating on your wife or husband. Generally, that's going to be something that you're peachy. I try to let her out because she's crying, but now I got to throw her away again. Yeah, you take a vow to love, honor, obey, and remain faithful. So that's a moral obligation that you generate by doing that vow. But it's not in every state, I think, that infidelity is like a statutory crime. Okay, so let's try now and examine one ethical theory that's going to give us some way of classifying actions among these categories here. So now this is going to be the ethical writings of John Stuart Mill. So John Stuart Mill, let me just tell you a little bit about him. He lived from 1806 until 1873. And he was a British philosopher, 73. And he was a British philosopher and political economist. He also briefly served in the British Parliament, which is like the equivalent there of the Congress. So he was a member of government in the Parliament for a little while too. So economist, philosopher, politician, and he had a lot of interesting writings. His views are well known in philosophy, and he had an interesting mix of views. For example, he would be today what we would call a libertarian politically, meaning that, and philosophically, but yeah, he would be what we would call libertarian today, meaning that he believed in limited government. He believed that the government should only have as much power as needed to maintain social order, but no more than that. And so according to the view of libertarianism, if you're engaged in self-regarding behavior that does not affect anyone else or their interests, then you should be permitted to do it under the law, even if it's perhaps a vice and it's self-destructive behavior. So like John Stuart Mill would have been a person who says that people should be allowed to drink alcohol if they want because it's just, their own body and it's their own health that concerns. During a time, of course, when prohibition and teetotaling was being debated in the United States. And he would have been a person who believed in the full abolition of slavery worldwide, and he believed in the emancipation of women so that women could vote. So he had those kind of progressive views, but he was also a libertarian philosophically. But his most important contribution that has really lasted through the generations is his writings of ethics. He is known as kind of the forefather of this ethical theory called utilitarianism. I know it's kind of a long, maybe cumbersome word, but that's the word for his theory of ethics, utilitarianism. And I'm going to write here the basic motto and standard that utilitarianism holds us to. It says to do this: act always to promote the greatest amount of overall happiness for the greatest number of people. Okay, so that's like the core defining principle of utilitarian ethics. That if you have choices to make in life and you're trying to make the right moral choice, you want to do the right thing, The utilitarian would advise you this way. They would say, well, consider your options and then try to estimate how much total happiness those different. Once you've figured out which one would lead to the most overall happiness for everybody affected, then that is the action that is classified as morally obligatory. So what's your moral obligation? It's always, therefore, to try and act in accordance with whatever will create the most total happiness for as many people as are affected. Now, why is it, though, that we would be persuaded to agree with this theory, which says maximize the greatest possible aggregate of happiness? Well, he gives a couple of reasons to try and defend this claim. One of those justifications is this principle called the greatest happiness principle. It does sound a little easy, Tristan, but there's devils in the details that we're going to have to expand on. So let's get to those. To reinforce this, he provides what is called the greatest happiness principle. So I'm going to put that on the board now. Okay, so why believe in utilitarianism? He says because this principle is true. This is called the greatest happiness principle, and here's what it does say. It says actions are right to the extent that they promote happiness. And actions are wrong to the extent that they promote the reverse of happiness. Okay, so yeah, actions are right to the degree, to the extent that they promote happiness, and wrong to the extent that they do the opposite, that they promote the reverse. So what's being claimed then is that it's a matter of degree, that an action in itself can produce either more or less happiness, or more or less of the reverse of happiness. And what makes it better morally is when it produces more rather than less. What makes it worse morally is when it produces more of the opposite, more than less. So, like, if I rushed into a burning building where people were trapped and I was trying to save their lives, if I rushed in there at a risk to myself and I, let's say, saved like a child from the house, I saved their life. And now, because their life did not end, all of their future happiness that otherwise would have been eliminated right there has been preserved. So, like them graduating college, getting married, having children, watching their kid take their first steps, starting a business, on and on and on. All the global travel, seeing things happen in the future, all those aspects of their future existence that would have basically been eliminated have been preserved through the act of saving them. So that promoted all their future happiness. That's a good thing. It saved a life, in other words. If they did save one life, they did something heroic. But if they say 2, 3, 4, 5, you know, it just, their moral record is even more and more impressive. It's better and better and more righteous the more happiness that's created. I don't want you to think, though, that it has to always do with life and death. It's like a person could have, let's say, worked at a food bank. If they worked there one weekend and helped some people out, great. If they did it for a month in the summer, that's even more benefit and happiness that's being spread around. So more is better, basically. On the other hand, when people do things that promote the reverse of happiness, like taking people's pleasure away or even causing them pain, that's thought to be a bad and a wrong thing. So take one of these psychopathic, like mass shooters or somebody that's just killing people in a public place. If they did that and they injured like 5 people and killed one, that's a horrible, horrible, bad thing. And we all know that. If they killed 10, 20, 50, it's getting worse and worse. And that can go all the way up the moral scale. If you have a person like Hitler, committing genocide against millions of people, that's just one of the most egregiously wrong things you could imagine. So it's sort of like, to the extent means that there's a range of variation that's possible. And so it's not just like a on and off switch like a light. There's more and less possible. So if a person creates more happiness, that's better than less. If a person creates more pain, takes more happiness away, that's worse rather than less. Now, a note on the understanding of the words happiness and reverse of happiness, according to the utilitarians. They have a precise definition of that. So let me put it on the table here. So in the usage of Mill and other utilitarians, happiness is simply thought of as the same thing as pleasure in the absence of pain. Pleasure in the absence of pain. And so if that's what the definition of happiness is, then what do you think is the definition of the reverse of happiness? You can kind of just logically deduce it because it's sort of the contrapositive of this. So if happiness is pleasure in the absence of pain, then the reverse of that would be what and what? Who can tell me that? Well, not so much sadness, but it's pain in the absence of pleasure. That's right. Okay, good. So when you're creating pleasure for yourself and others, or taking pain away, you're doing something good, according to this theory, morally good. When you're creating pain, though, causing pain for people, or taking their happiness and pleasure away from them, then you're doing something bad. And the more of this, the better, and the more of this, the worse. Now, therefore, just to be very clear, happiness is kind of identified, equated with pleasure in the usage of these utilitarians. Sometimes we use those words in slightly different ways, but they have really no distinction in the writings that we're looking at here. Okay, now, as even further defense of his theory, there's one more kind of justification that he offers, and it is this principle that says the only thing that we human beings pursue as an end is happiness, and everything else that we seek out in life is not really sought after as an end in itself. So let me put that information here and we will discuss that. This is yet another reason he thinks why this theory would sound appealing and plausible. It's the principle which says that happiness, and since pleasure is sort of synonymous with it to them, I'll put slash. Happiness slash pleasure, same, is the only thing that we pursue as an end and not as a means. Okay, happiness or pleasure, if you like, it's the only thing, the one and only thing that we all pursue as an end and not as a means. To break this down and fully comprehend it, we now have to think a bit about these two words within it: end, ends, and means. So even though I'm sure the word end and means are not foremost in your mind or the most everyday terms that you use, I bet you that many of us actually do have some kind of working understanding of it that I can bring to your mind just by asking you to think about a phrase that you've probably heard. Some of you have probably ever heard this famous saying that the ends justify the means. Have you heard that? If you've heard this saying or this expression, the ends justify the means, tell me, what do you think that statement means in other words? Suppose that you have a precocious younger brother or sister comes to you and says, hey, you're in college now. I heard a saying and I don't know what it means. They said ends justify the means. Huh? What does that even mean? Now you got to tell them. What does it mean? The ends justify the means. Well, Tristan, a little, not enough context, but there's something about that that could be definitely relevant. You say, Jess, the things that you did to achieve a goal are justified. Okay, good. That's pretty precise. Yeah, anybody else have a way of putting it? Ivan, if you get an A on the class but cheat the whole way, then it is immoral. Well, yes, it would be for sure. But let's not necessarily refer to examples, because when you say war crimes or the cheating case, those are fair, but they're examples. I'm asking for a definition or an explanation of the phrase and what the phrase has in common with all the examples. Stephen, you can do morally impermissible things in order to create more overall happiness. Okay, Stephen, I see the wheels turning and you're trying to connect this, definitely the saying, to the writing of the utilitarians. And it's not off base, but we can think of the saying without even having examined ethics in these writings. So all of these are kind of close. And let me bring some end means. What they're saying is that if you have a goal and the goal is important enough, then whatever you might have to do to get to that goal or to that end result becomes justifiable or okay. Yeah. So like somebody might say, you know, I would never lie. I believe lying is wrong. But in this one case, if I had told somebody the truth, they would have used the information to harm somebody who didn't deserve it. So when they asked me the information, I lied because my goal was to protect the person. And in this case, the end, the goal of protecting them, justified the means. So the ends justified the means. I wouldn't normally lie or condone it, but in this one case, the goal of protection kind of superseded the normal negative moral valence of lying. Or someone might think, I don't know, like the classic case of stealing food to feed somebody's family. They're thinking theft is wrong, but right now my family's about to die and their survival matters more than anything. So, you know, the end of saving their lives justified the act of stealing in this case. So a lot of times people use this saying to kind of justify behavior that would typically be regarded as questionable or unsavory, because they're saying, well, it's vindicated by the important purpose that I was trying to achieve by doing it. Okay? And so, Gary, you kind of say that the hardships you go through are small in comparison to the rewards you get. Not just about how it's small, it could be big. It's just that it's like judged to be okay to do those means if the end that you're deriving from them is good enough or important enough. So now, based on my little discussion here, what then does the word end mean specifically? When a person says ends justify the means, now I guess we're in a position where we can say then specifically what are ends? Overall, ends are just a fancy sounding word for what things? Ends are outcomes, yes, but outcomes that you want. And what is an outcome that you would desire? There's a word for that, or there's a few words. We could call that a what? A wanted outcome is simply a what? Who's got that? A desired outcome. It's a goal. Yeah, good. So goals or objectives. That's all that ends are. So ends are just goals / objectives. So it's like an end state, but the one that you want to happen. So it's your goal to get there. Now, what is a means then? The means in comparison, in relationship to the goals, the means are the what then? If the end is the goal, then the means are the actions, good, Alec, the actions of that what? That you do or take to get to the goal, right? So means are the actions taken or the methods that are used to achieve one's goals or ends. It says actions taken or methods used to achieve one's goals. Okay, now, having now broken down and fully understood what means and ends are, we can return to the principle here that Mill is arguing for. Mill says, well, why would you be a utilitarian? Because of this. Because happiness and pleasure, it's the only thing that each one of us is seeking as a goal and not as just a stepping stone to get to some other goal. What that means is that everything in life that you're doing is all based on the pursuit of your happiness. Everything you're doing, every action that you ever take is done with a view towards the pursuit of your happiness. And nothing else is desired as a goal except for that. Everything else that you want in life is just used as a means to get to the real bigger goal, which is your happiness or pleasure. Now, I like to sometimes try to make that somewhat plausible or relatable to the students by kind of walking you through your current situation a little bit and thinking about your motivations. So let's start from where you're at right now. One thing you're doing right now, I know, is that you're watching this lecture on YouTube for Philosophy 101. Now, I know you're doing it on purpose. Like, you weren't forced to do it. You're not doing it accidentally. It's not like someone has compelled you to do it against your will. So since you're doing this on your own volition freely, You must have a motive and a basis to do it. Why then? What's your motivation? What is your goal behind coming to this lecture? How did you get here? Yes, sleepwalk. I don't know, but to be real though, what is the reason? Why are you watching? Like, why are you watching this lecture? What are you trying to get from this? Like, what is your goal behind doing this? Okay, pass the class. Good. So get an A, pass the class. We'll take it step by step. So you watch a lecture like this lecture as a means to getting information, which is a means to getting a good grade that passes the class, right? But why do you want to pass the class? Like, that's not the final goal that you have either. Passing the class is just a means to other things. So why do you even want to pass the class? What would that lead to? Passing the class, why do you want that? Well, yes, you want the credit, good. But why do you want the credit? Because that'll help you get to your graduation. Okay, so we're going to go step by step. You're watching this lecture as a means to learning information in the class, which is desired as a means to passing the class. And you want to pass the class as one part of your overall progress towards your graduation. Now, why though do you want to graduate? Is it just that you want to stand on the stage with a degree and at that point you're like, I'm lost, I had no other goals, this was it? No, you want to graduate, I know, but that is also a means to another end. Graduation is a means to the end of getting a job or maybe continuing your further education, but at some point your education will be done and you'll use the completed education to be placed in some type of job or career, right? But why do you want a job? You just like labor? You like the idea of work? You're like, put me to work. All I want is work. Work is my thing. I love working. Well, yeah, you want a job, but not necessarily just for its own sake. You want the job as a means to what? I mean, why do you want a job? To make money. Okay, good. Now we're getting close to the end of the line, but we're not quite there yet. But let's go back to the beginning and take it again through these steps. You're watching this lecture. That's a means to getting some good grade in the class. That's a means towards graduating. Graduating is a means towards getting a job. And getting a job is a means towards making money and income. But why do you want the money? Why do you want money? I mean, you want it because money is a means to what? Money is a means to the purchasing power for goods and services and also financial security. But why do you want to be able to purchase goods and services and have financial security? Well, there we've reached the end of the line. That is desired because you think that that will make you happy, that will please you, that will provide a happy life. So when you really take a step back and you look at the big picture of your whole life, everything you're doing is directed towards the goal of getting happiness in the end. And nothing you're doing would be happening if you didn't think that it would lead to that goal. If someone could convince you that school was not in your better interest in terms of being happy, that it would just be a scam that would take all your tuition money and leave you with no employment or skills in the end, you'd probably say, well, you know, this isn't for me then. It won't make me happy, so it's not a goal that I want to pursue. So whenever you do anything in life, it's all towards the goal of happiness. But happiness is desired in and of itself, not as a goal to any other, not as a means to any other end, but just as the end. So like you desire money for the pleasure that comes from having the goods and services and possessions that money buys. But if you didn't think that that would make you happy, then why would you even care? So everything you do is based on the pursuit of your own happiness. And so what Mill is saying to you then is, if each individual man or woman, if that's their goal, if that's my goal, my happiness, and your goal is your happiness, and every single person has the same individual goal, then that means we already kind of recognize and we show this through our behavior that we're pursuing something that we think is good. So if happiness and pleasure is the good that each one seeks for themselves, then all Mill is trying to do is sort of magnifying that to the larger goal of ethics. If pleasure and happiness is the good, then more of it is better rather than less. So you should always kind of be directing your behavior, he thinks, based on the principle that promoting more happiness and pleasure with each action is the right action to do. Okay, now I'm looking at some of the comments. If I don't want to leave anything behind. Make a living, work to make money, which can then be used to do things in our free time to make us happy. Exactly, yeah. So good. Now, with all that in place, I wanted to quickly, if I could, walk you guys through a little realistic choice scenario, which we could use this theory to try and determine what the right action is. Okay, now this is going to be just a sort of a silly exercise in a way, but it's going to make a significant point, which is how to apply the theory of utilitarianism to like real life choice situations, okay? So what I'll do for this part of our notes is we'll create a box. And within the box, we're going to have 4 vertical columns and 4 horizontal rows which is going to create this grid of 16 boxes. Okay, so you see the grid. Sorry if not perfectly identically shaped or size of each grid box. But okay, in the top 4 vertical columns, what I'm going to do is for itemation, and even it's going to be a different type of well-known pizza topping. So you guys, we've all had pizza, and you know that there's some popular options or well-known options. Whether it's well-known or obscure, I would love it if some of you can just tell me what is one possible type of pizza. What's one option for pizza topping? Maybe the person will order cheese. Okay, so C. Letter C stands for cheese. Next column, a different one. Sausage, okay. C, sausage. S is the letter for sausage. Next, we need a different option. Okay, pepperoni. P for pepperoni. And then I see the option of Hawaiian. Okay, fair enough. So like you need pineapple and ham and stuff. Hawaiian. Cheese, sausage, pepperoni, and Hawaiian. Now, over here to the 4 left horizontal rows, I'm just going to have 4 of us that are in the class. Pineapple on pizza, yeah, that's going to already be a morally charged debate. But 4 people from the class. I just would love it for just 4 of you guys to quickly volunteer. It's not a big deal. Like I'm just going to ask these people who do step up to give me some basic answers about their views on types of pizzas that we see here. So just let me know in the chat who I can rely on for this. I only need a couple of you guys, and we're not even in class, so there's no pressure on you. No one's looking at anybody. We're just asking questions in the chat. So who's one person? Okay, Ivan, thanks. And okay, Martina, I see you, and okay, good. Parker, I saw your name also. It's kind of nice to have I don't know, an even split, 2 guys, 2 girls. Is that fair? Does any other lady want to step up? Parker, before your Wi-Fi broke out, I'm not sure. I was just saying something about how I need these names, and then you volunteered. Gary, Rachel. Okay, thanks, Rachel. Yeah. Okay, so Ivan, Martina, Parker, Rachel, you 4 guys here. Think about this. I want you to start thinking in your mind right now. I'm going to ask you when I call on you to give me your rating pretty much for these 4 options, and I'm just going to make it be between 0 and 50 so that we just have a standardized range. Okay, so like the number that you're going to give me, if I ask you what's your number for like cheese or something, if you tell me 30, 40, that's going to be like the amount of pleasure by numeric value that you would receive if that was the choice made. And so you kind of have to like make it accurate to your own preferences. If you like, for example, like cheese twice as much as pepperoni, then you should reflect that in your scoring. So this should be like 40 or this should be 20 in that case. So let's say 50 is the maximum value. So that's, if it's like your favorite or whatever, you're going to go all the way to the top. Sorry about the awkward thing. I'm not looking at the whole chat, but whatever, yeah. You're a girl. Thanks, Parker. What can I say? We're not all watching on camera. But 3 girls and 1 guy, not a problem. Not a problem at all. Okay, back to what I was saying. The 4 names, the scoring of pizza preferences, okay? So as I go through the list, just please help me out with your preferences. You're asked about cheese, sausage, pepperoni, Hawaiian. So for you guys here to already start thinking about it, we're starting with Ivan. Okay, so Ivan, tell me about how you feel with cheese. What are your feelings when it comes to cheese pizza? 0 out of 50 pleasure points, units of pleasure. On that matrix, in that range, what value are you going to give cheese pizza? Okay, 25, so straight in the middle. Not bad. Now I want to ask you about sausage. What would you say about that? Just let's go sausage, and then pepperoni, and then Hawaiian. Let's see your next 3 values. Okay, so 45 is sausage. That's pretty significant. 49 to the pepperoni. So pepperoni lover. And for you, Hawaiian is like a 3rd place. Okay, not bad. Thank you. Now to Martina. Martina, help me out. What do you say? Cheese, sausage, pepperoni Hawaiian? Hit me with your 4 values, left to right. Parker, the numbers are going to stand for your amount of pleasure you get if that's the choice that is made. So like you're basically rating, instead of 10 out of 10 and all that internet stuff, it's 50 out of 50 is the highest rating. 0 out of 0 is the lowest rating out of 50. Okay, so Martina, you say 40, 10, 15, 25. So those are the stated preferences of Martina. Thank you. Okay, so next up, Parker, thank you for your assistance. What do you say? We have 4 types of pizza going from left to right. Cheese, sausage, pepperoni, Hawaiian. You're rating these. And therefore, what do you say about each one of those 4? 45, 45, 30, and 5. And finally, we get to Rachel. Rachel, what's up? Tell me about those 4 options and your various scored preferences. So 40, 35, 49, 10. Okay, so here you see the grid is filled in. And each box assigns a score given by the individual to that type of pizza topping. And it represents the amount of pleasure that individual will experience in case that is the choice that has been made. Okay, so like in Ivan's case, we see his favorite's pepperoni. Martina prefers cheese. Parker is kind of neutral between these 2, but they're both good to her. And for Rachel, it's also pepperoni. Now, if we're utilitarians, and remember the utilitarian motto is always take the action that will create the most overall happiness for the greatest number of people. There's a little operation that we just now have to do to come to our result as to what we ought to do if we're the one making the order here for these 4 people. And these are the only 4 options that are available. So what little operation shall be done to come to the conclusion now? Just one more step. And that means that we will have to then do what in terms of this grid? Who has a thought on this? The operation I'm hinting at. Well, you say take the average. That's perhaps possible, but I think it's a little bit more straightforward to just get to the aggregate, which means that we have to do some elementary addition, yeah? Let's do addition, and we're gonna have 4 columns, and there will be 4 totals, it's 4 sums at the bottom, okay? So just double check my math quickly as we're closing class. But 40, 40, 80, 125, 150 is the total for cheese. Here's sausage, 45, 55, so 90, 100, 135. Okay, and then pepperoni, I think we can already see is going to probably be the winner, but this would be 98 plus 45, so 143. Actually, no. Yeah, I see. And then Hawaiian, 65, 70, 80. Okay, just some quick math. Now, based on our whole discussion and lecture, you can tell me, what is the so-called morally obligatory choice now regarding these 4 options in this scenario? The right thing to do, the moral obligation would be to order cheese, correct? I'm putting the asterisk there to signify that. Why? Because in this given case, cheese creates the most total utility for all people affected by the choice situation. I'm going to take a picture of this so that when we start next class, I can draw the graph up there again, and then I just have a couple of more comments to add to it to clarify some remaining elements of the of this theory of utilitarianism. But we'll finish with we'll close up the whole discussion of Mill on Friday. We're pretty much done. I just have to speak to you about a couple of objections to the theory, but this was me trying to give you the basics of how it works, kind of. So I'll clarify and finish up the discussion of Mill, and then on Friday we will start talking about another ethical theory that's much different from his, which is the writing of Immanuel Kant. So read Kant and the Metaphysics of Morals paper for Friday, and finish up the writing of Mill if you haven't. Keep in mind that we eliminated the writing of J.J.C. Smart, so that's one essay that got taken off of our list from the syllabus. Okay, guys, so thanks so much for a good meeting and all of your help and assistance. These cats are just all over the place, so now they get to hang out with me for a little while. But thanks again, everyone, and sorry, Parker, for the little confusion for a minute there. Take care, guys, and I'll see you back then on Friday. Okay, bye-bye.